Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are cracking open a chapter filled with awe, profound silence, and really earth-shattering judgments. Revelation chapter 8. If the previous chapters felt like mounting anticipation, this is the dramatic pivot point in God's prophetic timetable. It really moves us from that slow build of the seals into truly massive escalating catastrophes.
That's exactly right. The chapters leading up to this, they set the stage. We saw the breaking of the first 6 seals, the sealing of the 144,000 servants of God. But Revelation 8, this is where we analyze the opening of the final, the climactic 7th seal. And what's crucial here, the 7th seal doesn't bring just a single event. It acts more like a divine trigger.
A trigger.
Yeah, it unleashes an entire new cycle of God's explicit wrath, of the 7 trumpet judgments. It's a whole new level.
Okay, so our mission today, and this is tailored specifically for you, the learner, is to unpack this chapter, Revelation 8, verse by verse. We're doing this from a consistent pre-tribulation perspective. Now, that framework is essential because it means these catastrophic events, they happen during the 7-year tribulation period after the church has been raptured.
Right. The church is viewing this, according to this perspective, from the heavenly realm.
Exactly. So we want to understand the deep meaning behind that incredible silence. We'll see the mysterious power of prayer that actually acts as a catalyst.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And also the physical and spiritual nature of these cosmic disasters and, the unseen spiritual battles that must be raging behind the scenes.
And we have quite a bit of source material to draw on here. It covers these incredibly detailed liturgical scenes in heaven. You see the ritual, the orderliness of God's administration. But then alongside that, you have the massive ecological fallout affecting Earth's systems. We'll also draw deep scriptural parallels, grounding these frankly shocking images in Old Testament prophecy.
Which makes them feel less arbitrary, right? More purposeful.
It shows a pattern.
This is where the pace just shifts dramatically.
Yeah.
Global systems start to buckle under divine pressure. Okay, let's unpack this. And we begin, well, in the most unusual way possible, with complete silence.
Yeah, it's quite something.
So, verse 1, the opening of the 7th seal. Just think back to the sheer noise leading up to this point. You have the mighty worship, the shouts, the thundering cosmic signs of the 6th seal, the martyrs crying out for justice.
Constant sound, really.
Constant sound. Then, when the Lamb, Jesus Christ, finally breaks this 7th and final seal, everything just stops. Dead silence. The text says there is a sudden, complete silence. The Greek word is sige in heaven for about half an hour.
And that word siga, it implies absolute stillness. A total cessation of all sound. And you really can't overstate how unusual this is. Heaven, as Revelation 4 and 5 depict it, is fundamentally defined by constant sound. You've got the 10,000 times 10,000 angels shouting praises, the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders perpetually casting down their crowns, singing hymns.
Right, it's a symphony of worship.
Exactly. So for that overwhelming cosmic praise to just cease immediately and completely, it's jarring. It really grabs your attention.
And it's not just a quick pause either. It specifies about half an hour. Now, if heaven kind of exists outside our normal time, why pin down a specific duration like that? It feels very intentional.
Well, the sources suggest that specifying this duration about 30 minutes, it intensifies the dramatic tension. It's a noticeable, measurable period that forces focused attention. The silence primarily functions as a liturgical pause, a pause of awe and solemn expectation. It's this moment of final recognition of the gravity, the sheer weight of the events that are about to follow.
So if heaven is like the ultimate judicial chamber, this silence is like the courtroom falling silent before the verdict is read.
That's a great analogy. It's the highest expression of a judicial pause. The atmosphere shifts instantly from ceaseless praise to this profound reverence before God executes divine, non-reversible justice. And when you look at the Old Testament parallels, this idea of silencing the world before divine judgment, it's a recurring theme. Habakkuk 2.20 says, "The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him." And Zephaniah 1.7, "Be silent before the sovereign Lord, for the day of the Lord is near." This half hour of silence in heaven is, in a way, heaven's collective intake of breath. It's acknowledging the moment has arrived. The verdict is sealed, and the consequences will be, frankly, terrifyingly comprehensive.
It also gives us a crucial insight into God's process, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This judgment isn't impulsive. It's not chaotic rage. It's introduced by sobriety, deliberation.
Absolutely. Careful counsel.
And for those tribulation saints on earth, whose prayers we'll see are about to fuel this next phase, this silence is a monumental sign. It says, heaven has heard, heaven has taken counsel. The final just response is now prepared.
So as this profound silence ends, John sees 7 distinct angels. These seem to be high-ranking angels who stand perpetually ready before God, angels of great distinction, clearly entrusted with carrying out this next critical phase of the prophetic timeline.
And they're given 7 trumpet salpinges in Greek. The fact that they were given them really emphasizes the divine origin, doesn't it? This whole sequence is initiated and controlled by God. The angels are the powerful instruments, but it's his sovereign will being executed.
Precisely. And the symbolism of the trumpet here is incredibly rich. It's so much more than just making noise. In ancient Israel, the trumpet, often the shofar, signaled so many important things. Assembly of the people, the start of a war, the solemn announcement of a new king, or a warning of impending danger.
Like the trumpets at Jericho or Mount Sinai.
Exactly. Think of the shofar on the Day of Atonement, or those trumpets that heralded God's terrifying appearance on Mount Sinai back in Exodus 19.
So these trumpets in Revelation 8, they're announcing God's escalating intervention. They're not random disasters. They are purposeful pronouncements of judgment. They're meant to grab humanity's attention, call them, ideally, to repentance even at this late stage.
And crucially, look at verse 6. It says, the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound them. That deliberate act of preparation emphasizes meticulous order. God's judgment here is methodical. It's measured, strategic. It's a set of cascading, escalating consequences designed to dismantle the worldly systems that have stood in rebellion against him.
That preparation is such a stark contrast to the chaos about to erupt on earth. It shows divine action is entirely under control, even when unleashing destruction.
Precisely. Nothing is haphazard.
Okay, now here in verses 3 to 5, this is where the action gets really interesting. It connects that solemn silence and the preparation for judgment to the very real suffering of the faithful on earth. Before the trumpets actually sound, we encounter another angel. He's described as a distinct priestly figure. He comes and stands at the golden altar, specifically the altar of incense, and he has a golden censer.
Yes, this specific angel seems to fulfill a priestly, almost mediatorial role. Its imagery deeply rooted in the Old Testament temple liturgy, specifically the offering of incense. And notice, he is given a great quantity of incense. This isn't just a token amount. He's given this incense to mix with the prayers of all the saints. This mixing is the hinge point of the entire chapter, perhaps the entire sequence.
Prayers of the saints, they're not just heard, they're collected, like the accumulate.
Exactly. They're collected and stored, presented before God. The incense, as you mentioned, symbolizes the prayers rising effectively to God's presence, perhaps purifying or sanctifying them before the throne. Psalm 141.2 is the classic parallel. Let my prayer be counted as incense before you.
But who are these saints whose prayers are being mixed here?
Well, the term saints, hagioi, is broad. It certainly includes the prayers of God's faithful throughout history, especially those prayers for justice from Old Testament martyrs. It includes the raptured church now in heaven. But most pressingly, in this specific context of the tribulation, it primarily points to the persecuted tribulation saints. This includes those martyrs we saw under the altar back in Revelation 6.10, relentlessly crying out, "How long, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Their cries are reaching a crescendo.
So the theological implication here is, well, it's staggering. The prayers of God's people aren't just passive requests floating around. They are presented as a vital reality. They directly influence the timing and the initiation of divine action.
That's the heart of it. God, in his sovereignty, actually chooses to use the accumulated intercession, the cries for justice from his persecuted people, as the very catalyst for unleashing the next wave of judgment. It's an incredible picture of the efficacy of prayer.
It upholds the idea that prayer has real power in God's redemptive governance.
Precisely. And we see the climax of this liturgical act in verse 5. The angel has collected the prayers, mixed them with the incense representing their purified essence rising to God. Now he takes the same censer and fills it with fire from the altar. This fire is often interpreted as the fire of God's holy presence, his righteous judgment, his divine response. And this filled censer, now carrying God's fiery answer, is then forcefully hurled upon the earth.
That verb hurled, it's so active, so dramatic. This isn't a gentle blessing falling down. It's like a celestial weapon being deployed. The prayers of the saints, mixed with incense and ignited by divine fire, are effectively weaponized.
It is the ultimate judicial response visualized. This action confirms that the requests of the persecuted are not only acknowledged, but are absolutely instrumental in launching the trumpet judgments. Their prayers have reached a critical mass, you might say.
And the result on earth is immediate.
Immediate theophany signs. Thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and a massive earthquake. This imagery echoes the display of God's terrifying presence and power back at Mount Sinai in Exodus 19.
So confirms to everyone left on Earth that these disturbances aren't random natural events.
Not at all. They are the direct result of God rising from his heavenly dwelling to execute judgment. The spiritual petition of the saints has physically ignited the beginning of the tribulation's most intense phase so far.
Wow, what a powerful image for anyone who feels their prayers are just disappearing into the void. Here, prayer is literally the thing that shifts cosmic events.
It underscores the immense value God places on the cries of his people.
All right, so the censer's been thrown, the earth is shaken, signaling God's response, and now the 7 angels, who had prepared themselves, begin to sound their trumpets one by one. But before we dive into the specific details of each trumpet blast, we really need to pause and re-emphasize that foundational thirds motif. It runs through these first 4 judgments consistently.
Yes, that motif striking only 1/3 of creation with each plague is absolutely critical. It defines the nature of these judgments. They are severe, yes, but they are fundamentally warning judgments, not yet complete annihilation.
It shows restraint, then.
Immense restraint and mercy, actually.
Yeah.
If God had chosen to strike 2/3, or the entire planet at this stage, life as we know it would simply cease. By limiting the destruction to 1/3, he's signaling several things. He's showing the unrepentant world that these are targeted, powerful, undeniably divine interventions, not just bad luck or natural cycles. And he's giving them a final, desperate chance to recognize his sovereignty and repent before the final, total judgments, the bowl plagues, arrive later in Revelation.
Okay, so that 1/3 limit is key to understanding the purpose here. It's judgment, but with an offer, however slim, of mercy still embedded within it. So the first angel sounds his trumpet in verse 7, and the impact is immediate, terrifying. It's a strike against the foundational support system of all land life, the earth itself and its vegetation. We see hail and fire ominously mingled with blood thrown down upon the earth. That combination sounds utterly destructive.
It's a combination designed for maximum systemic failure on land. The hail provides the crushing physical force, the fire provides the consuming heat, and the mingling with blood. Well, that suggests the resulting carnage, the death, the life force being drained away, and the consequence described is devastatingly specific. 1/3 of the earth itself is affected, 1/3 of the trees are burned up, and critically, all the green grass is completely burned up.
Wait, all the green grass, not just 1/3.
That's what the text says for the grass. All the green grass was burned up. This seems to be an exception to the 1/3 rule for this specific element, perhaps emphasizing the immediate and total collapse of the primary food source for grazing animals.
The impact of losing all grass would be catastrophic agricultural collapse, globally, almost instantly.
Absolutely. The loss of grass immediately starves all grazing livestock, cattle, sheep, goats, anything dependent on pasture. This triggers rapid, widespread famine as meat and dairy sources vanish. Furthermore, the loss of 1/3 of all trees, think about that. They're the planet's lungs, essential for oxygen. They provide food, timber for shelter, habitats. Losing 1/3 accelerates environmental collapse dramatically.
It destabilizes both the atmosphere and the food supply chain for basically every community on Earth in one go.
And the sources, as you mentioned earlier, draw a very strong parallel here to the 7th Egyptian plague. That comparison helps us understand God's judicial pattern.
Right, the plague of hail and fire in Egypt.
Yes. Exodus 9.23-25 describes that plague where God sent thunder and devastating hail mixed with fire. It destroyed everything in the fields, crops, flax, barley, and stripped the trees bare. It precisely mirrors this targeting of agricultural infrastructure in Revelation 8. The message is clear. God is consistently judging the rebellious world system, much like he judged Pharaoh's oppressive kingdom back then. This judgment targets productivity, sustenance, and the false security people place in the natural order when they ignore the Creator.
Okay, so the land is scorched. Then the second angel sounds his trumpet, and the judgment shifts focus entirely. It moves to the global oceans, striking at the lifeblood of global trade and all marine life. John describes seeing something. Well, he struggles for words. Something that appeared, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire hurled into the sea. That phrase, as it were, seems really important. He's trying to describe something outside his normal experience.
Exactly. He's using the closest analogy he can grasp. And the interpretation of this burning mountain is heavily debated, with 2 main views, both carrying immense implications. The first is the literal view. This argues it's a massive celestial object, a huge comet fragment, a meteor, maybe a large asteroid blazing as it enters Earth's atmosphere and crashing into the ocean.
The physical impact alone would be enormous.
Oh, unimaginable. Such an impact would cause mega tsunamis wiping out coastlines, potentially trigger underwater volcanic activity, and certainly boil or chemically alter the surrounding water, making it appear blood red, killing marine life through heat, shockwaves, and toxicity, not just the physical collision.
Okay, that's the literal physical interpretation. But there's also a symbolic view, suggesting the mountain represents something else.
That's right. Scripture often uses mountains symbolically to represent a great kingdom, empire, or world power. Think of Jeremiah 51:25, where God calls Babylon a destroying mountain that he will roll down and make into a burnt mound.
So applying that lens, this judgment could be targeting a major geopolitical or perhaps a dominant naval power structure, one that relies heavily on the sea for its strength and influence. God is metaphorically casting it down into the sea of nations, causing its systemic collapse.
And the beauty, or perhaps the terror of Revelation, is that both views can work together. They aren't mutually exclusive.
How so?
Well, the physical object, the literal meteor, if that's what it is, could cause the physical destruction described, the death of sea creatures, the destruction of ships. But the metaphor of the burning mountain simultaneously confirms that this physical destruction is specifically targeting the hubris, the pride, the naval and commercial might of the rebellious world system. The physical event carries a symbolic payload, if you will.
So regardless of its precise physical nature, asteroid or symbol or both, the consequence is clear and global in verses 8 and 9. A third of the sea becomes like blood,
Suggesting massive death and pollution, echoing the first Egyptian plague where the Nile turned to blood.
a third of the living sea creatures die.
Crippling fishing industries worldwide, leading to profound food shortages, especially for coastal populations, and economic ruin for those dependent on the sea.
And a third of all global ships are destroyed.
This is the knockout blow to global commerce. Think about our modern world. Almost everything travels by sea at some point. Oil, medicine, food staples, electronics, manufacturing components. Losing 1/3 of the global shipping fleet means international trade essentially grinds to a halt.
Logistics just break down completely. It doesn't just hurt the stock market, it isolates communities, prevents aid from reaching disaster zones, and destroys the very framework that modern globalized civilization relies upon. This is a severe, targeted social and economic weapon.
And beyond the economics, just imagine the sheer scale of the pollution from a third of the ocean's life dying off. Billions upon billions of tons of decomposing marine life would generate an overwhelming stench, release toxic gases, and create an environmental disaster zone, making huge stretches of coastline potentially uninhabitable. It's horrific on every level.
So the land is devastated. The saltwater seas are struck. Now the third trumpet, sounded by the third angel, focuses on the most vital resource for human survival: fresh water.
Yes, verses 10 and 11 describe a great star, burning hush lampus like a torch or a lamp, blazing brightly falling from heaven. But this star doesn't fall into the sea. It falls on a third of the rivers and on the springs of fresh water, the sources people drink from.
And this falling star has a name: Wormwood. Absinthos in Greek. The consequence is immediate and deadly. A third of the fresh waters become bitter. Wormwood is known for its intense bitterness, and the text explicitly states that many people died from the water because it had been made bitter.
This is a terrifyingly direct judgment. Unlike the sea judgment, which primarily disrupted commerce and the marine food chain, this one targets direct human consumption and survival. The bitterness of wormwood signifies lethal toxicity. The water isn't just unpleasant, it's fatal.
This is a widespread public health crisis coupled with catastrophic environmental contamination, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now, let's unpack the layers of meaning behind this name, Wormwood. The literal view suggests this could be another physical astronomical event. Perhaps a comet or its fragments containing toxic chemicals, maybe heavy metals, cyanide compounds, complex organic toxins that physically contaminate major freshwater sources across a third of the globe upon impact or atmospheric dispersal.
We see analogies in our own time, sadly, with industrial chemical spills or radioactive contamination rendering water sources bitter, dangerous, undrinkable.
Right. But the name itself, wormwood, carries profound symbolic weight, especially from the Old Testament. The Hebrew word la'ana, translated as wormwood, is consistently used as a symbol of divine judgment, sorrow, and the bitter consequences of apostasy and idolatry. Deuteronomy 29:18 warns against Israelites whose hearts turn away from God to serve other gods, becoming like a root that produces poisonous fruit and wormwood.
So turning away leads to bitterness.
Exactly. And Jeremiah 9.15 is even more direct. God says he will punish the unfaithful people of Judah. Behold, I will feed them, this people, with wormwood and give them poisoned water to drink. The link between spiritual unfaithfulness and literal bitter judgment is explicit.
So the star named Wormwood is likely both things at once. A physical contaminant falling from the sky and a potent spiritual commentary delivered through its name.
That seems to be the most compelling reading from the sources. The physical toxicity is the visible, tangible result of the world's prior moral and spiritual corruption. The bitterness they taste in the water reflects the spiritual bitterness they embrace by rejecting God, the true waters of life.
It's the bitter harvest of rebellion.
Precisely. This judgment forces the world to physically ingest the consequences of their spiritual choices. This dual physical-spiritual nature is crucial for understanding Revelation's judgments. It's a devastating ecological disaster, yes, but it's profoundly punitive and carries a deep moral message in its timing and its very name.
And you can't help but see how this resonates with modern anxieties. Fears about resource wars, contamination of essential water supplies. It's a persistent modern nightmare. The vulnerability of our freshwater systems is suddenly exposed on a global, terrifying scale.
Okay, so the first three trumpets have systematically targeted Earth's core infrastructure: the land, the saltwater seas, and the freshwater sources. The fourth trumpet, in verse 12, completes this initial phase of ecological assault by striking the fundamental regulator of all life and time: the cosmos itself, the very lights in the heavens.
What happens?
A third of the sun is struck, a third of the moon is struck, and a third of the stars are struck. The result is that their light is significantly diminished, specifically by 1/3.
So this means a third less daylight during the day and a third less illumination from the moon and stars at night. It's a direct assault on the fundamental, reliable rhythms of existence that we take for granted.
The consequences are incredibly far-reaching, even though the effect is, again, partial, only 1/3 reduction. Physically, this immediately disrupts photosynthesis on a massive scale, leading to further crop failures and agricultural chaos, compounding the damage from the first trumpet. It would also almost certainly affect global climate patterns, perhaps leading to rapid cooling, unpredictable weather, or severe temperature instability. The entire ecosystem is thrown off balance.
And psychologically, this must be absolutely devastating for those experiencing it. When the very source of light and warmth, the sun itself, is visibly compromised, permanently dimmed, humanity's illusion of control over nature completely shatters.
Imagine living under perpetually dimmed skies, a constant twilight. People would be left with a chilling, pervasive sense of dimness, cold, and deep anxiety. There's no escaping the visible, constant reminder that an unseen, sovereign, and frankly terrifying power is actively dismantling the cosmos they rely on.
It removes any doubt that these are natural phenomena.
Absolutely. And the sources confirm this cosmic darkening aligns perfectly with established Old Testament and New Testament prophetic warnings regarding the day of the Lord. Joel 2.31 warns that the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Jesus himself, in Matthew 24.29, describes the signs preceding his return. The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken.
So this darkening isn't just a random plague, it's a definitive cosmic signpost. It reinforces that this is not some freak sequence of natural disasters, but the divinely orchestrated, foretold culmination of the age drawing near.
Exactly. It's God shaking the heavens as a prelude to shaking the earth even more severely.
So if we pull back and look at these first four trumpet judgments together, we see a clear pattern emerging: land, sea, freshwater, and light. The four absolute essentials for biological life and for civilized society are all systematically and partially crippled.
It's systematic destruction, precisely targeted, designed to remove all earthly comfort, expose the fragility of human systems, and force the survivors to confront the undeniable reality of divine power and judgment.
Okay, we've detailed the sheer physical destruction of those first four trumpets. But now we need to step back, as we do in the deep dive, and conduct that multidimensional analysis. We need to explore the unseen spiritual architecture behind these events and the complex web of consequences.
Right. It's far too easy to view these events through a purely physical lens, comets, pollution, global dimming. But Revelation insists, chapter after chapter, on an unseen dimension where spiritual beings, particularly angels, are the active agents carrying out God's specific will.
That really came through in the first part of the chapter, didn't it? With the angels receiving the trumpets, the angel hurling the censer.
Exactly. Angels are not just passive spectators here. They are the douloi, the obedient servants executing specific commands. They receive the trumpets, they hurl the fire mixed with prayers, and soon, as we'll see in the following chapters, they'll be involved in restraining destructive winds and even engaging in direct spiritual warfare. This confirms that these catastrophic events are not random or chaotic occurrences from God's perspective. Behind every physical disaster described is a precise, ordered spiritual administration carrying out a divine plan.
And that partial nature we discussed, striking only thirds, that's perhaps the clearest indication of divine restraint within that plan.
Yes, the constraint is absolutely purposeful. God is limiting the chaos, demonstrating that he is directing history toward a specific, predetermined outcome. He's not annihilating humanity or the planet at this stage. He is warning, shaking, calling to account. This controlled chaos is a key theological takeaway. Even in what seems like the darkest moment of judgment, God remains perfectly sovereign, his power is precisely measured, and he holds the line.
Let's circle back to that prayer judgment nexus from verses 3-5. The idea that the prayers of the saints are the catalyst, the spiritual fire that ignites these physical judgments. How do the sources explore why God designs it this way? Why make human intercession the trigger?
Well, the sources emphasize this reveals the profound integration of heavenly and earthly realities. God isn't portrayed as distant or detached. He is deeply, intimately concerned with the cries, the suffering, the pleas for justice from his persecuted people on earth. By allowing the prayers of the saints to act as the trigger for judgment, he validates their suffering. He honors the enduring faith of the martyrs, fulfilling the promise implied in Revelation 6:9, "How long, O Lord?" It shows that his divine timetable, while sovereignly set, is also responsive. It can be influenced, or perhaps the timing activated, by the faithful intercession of his people.
So it upholds the truth that worship and righteous requests are somehow integral to God's ultimate governance. They're part of the engine.
That's a good way to put it. The prayers function as the final necessary ingredient presented before the throne for the execution of long-promised vengeance and justice upon a rebellious world system.
And thinking about what is being judged. The resources, water, land, sea, light, that suggest the spiritual battle itself is being waged, at least in part, over the control and corruption of the basic necessities of life.
Absolutely. Demonic forces throughout scripture and history often seek to control, corrupt, and hoard the things necessary for human flourishing: the environment, food, water, even truth itself, leading to things like the spiritual bitterness symbolized by Wormwood. The trumpet judgments can be seen as God's decisive countermove. He is exposing the fragility of the systems the world trusts in, trade, agriculture, natural cycles, and simultaneously purging or judging the systems that have become corrupted by human idolatry, greed, and spiritual darkness. It's a reclaiming and a judgment all at once.
Now, Revelation is notoriously challenging, partly because it's so dense with symbolism. Readers can easily miss the depth if they overlook its foundational literary structure, especially its constant conversation with the Old Testament.
That's critical. We have to recognize its profound reliance on Old Testament allusion, metaphor, and especially typology.
Okay, the most obvious but still essential place to start is typology. We mentioned it before, but the sequential pattern of these first four trumpets, hail and fire, then the sea turned to blood, the poisoned water, the darkness, it's an undeniable echo of the plagues God sent upon Egypt.
Yes, that typological link is almost certainly intentional. It's designed to function like a giant historical footnote, reminding the reader of God's established authority and pattern of judgment. By repeating elements of the Exodus plague sequence, God asserts his sovereign right to judge creation itself and to dismantle unjust, oppressive systems, just as he did when confronting Pharaoh's defiant regime. It confirms that the God who judged Egypt is the same God who judges the final, global, end-times world empire. His character and his methods for dealing with entrenched rebellion are consistent.
Then there's the potent metaphor of wormwood. Even if we take the star literally as a physical object, the name itself functions powerfully as a metaphor.
It's a succinct, brutal metaphor for moral corruption and its inevitably bitter, deadly consequences. Wormwood, in the Old Testament context, signifies the deep sorrow, the poisoning of relationships and society that results from apostasy, from turning away from God. The physical poisoning of the water becomes the tangible manifestation of the spiritual poisoning that had already taken root.
It's a taste of their own medicine, so to speak.
In the most literal sense, yes. And finally, we should consider the allegory of the trumpets themselves. They aren't just passive signals of coming events. They seem to be active agents of both proclamation and accomplishment.
What do you mean by that?
The trumpets fulfill a dual role inherent in prophetic pronouncements. They function as warnings, like a herald announcing that something momentous is about to happen, but they are also depicted as the very instruments that accomplish the judgment. When the angel sounds the trumpet, the disaster occurs immediately.
Ah, I see. The sound is the trigger.
Exactly. The action is immediate, emphasizing the power and the finality of God's decreed word. The trumpet blast isn't just information, it's an act of power.
Okay, let's try to synthesize these layers now. Let's examine the consequences to these first 4 trumpets, not just physically, but across different dimensions, theological, social, psychological, visitors for the survivors who were left on earth during this part of the tribulation.
All right. Theologically, Revelation 8 serves as an undeniable confirmation of God's justice and his righteousness. The judgments are shown to be precise, punitive, yet, crucially at this stage, still partial, demonstrating both wrath and a lingering measure of mercy or warning. They confirm that God is not aloof or indifferent. He is actively engaged in judging evil, purifying creation, and vindicating his persecuted people. And that liturgy justice link, we talked about the idea that heavenly worship and the prayers of the saints are directly integrated into the execution of divine action on earth. It's a central, enduring theological takeaway from this chapter.
Now, shift to the emotional and psychological toll on those experiencing this. The initial silence must have created this deep sense of awe and dread. But the subsequent escalating disasters, they would shatter human sanity, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. Imagine living through this. When a third of the sun's light permanently disappears, when the seas literally turn red and stink of death, when your drinking water becomes deadly bitter overnight, the trauma would be immense and inescapable.
The loss of predictability, of basic safety.
It causes profound psychological dislocation. Think about our fundamental human need for security, for reliable resources. When water, light, food, even the ground beneath your feet, remember the earthquake in verse 5, are actively attacked by unseen, seemingly cosmic forces, mass panic, collective grief, and utter despair would become the norm. Social trust would utterly collapse. Furthermore, for those who remain unrepentant, the growing realization that these events are not random but are direct, targeted acts of a righteous God they have rejected would induce profound fear and terror, knowing their own actions have provoked this catastrophe.
But for the tribulation saints, the believers going through this,
For them, paradoxically, these same terrifying events might induce a powerful sense of awe, validation of their faith, and perhaps even a grim hope that God is finally acting to bring justice and end the reign of evil. Their suffering is seen, their prayers are answered, albeit in a terrifying way.
Okay, now let's look socially and economically. The consequences described here would lead to the rapid disintegration of civilization as we currently understand it. That destruction of 1/3 of global shipping, for instance.
That alone cripples the complex, interconnected global economy. Specialization, international trade, resource sharing, the things modern society depends on become impossible or severely hampered.
Isolation would skyrocket.
Definitely. Communities heavily dependent on imported goods, food, fuel, medicine, or reliant on maritime transport would be immediately cut off, facing starvation and collapse. Resource wars over the remaining 2/3 of usable farmland and, especially, clean fresh water would likely become inevitable and brutal. Vulnerable populations, dense cities, island nations, regions without independent water sources would suffer disproportionately and almost immediately. This chapter paints a chilling picture of societal breakdown driven primarily by ecological collapse initiated from heaven, not just by human warfare.
And finally, let's touch on the cultural and church activity during this specific time. According to the pre-tribulation view we're using, the institutional church, the bride of Christ, is already in heaven with Christ. So the focus on earth shifts entirely to the tribulation saints.
That's right. This includes the 144,000 sealed Jewish evangelists mentioned in chapter 7 and the great multitude from every nation who are coming to faith during the tribulation, often under conditions of extreme persecution and martyrdom.
What defines their culture or activity?
Their defining characteristics, based on this text and context, would be intense intercession. They are the ones whose accumulating prayers are fueling that heavenly censor and fierce endurance under trial. Theirs is a culture of survival against overwhelming odds, bold testimony even unto death, and an immediate, desperate reliance on God's sovereignty. They know, perhaps better than any other group in history, that despite the terror surrounding them, their suffering is seen, their faithfulness is valued, and their petitions are active, powerful weapons in the heavenly arsenal. They live in a state of high spiritual tension, literally watching their prayers be answered in these terrifying, world-altering ways.
So chapter 8 closes, not with a resolution, but with a dramatic punctuation mark. It sets the stage for even worse things to come. Verse 13.
Yes, after the fourth trumpet, John hears a lone eagle. The Greek word is aitos, which can mean eagle or possibly vulture, emphasizing judgment or, as some sources suggest based on context and other manuscripts, perhaps a powerful angelic messenger, flying directly through mid-heaven, high above the earth, where everyone can see and hear.
And this messenger isn't whispering. It's crying out with a loud voice. A message for the whole world. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, specifically because of the remaining 3 trumpet blasts that are yet to sound.
That repetition, woe, 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 is a Hebrew literary device indicating the utmost degree of calamity and sorrow. It signals a severe, terrifying escalation is coming.
So this verse functions as a crucial transition.
Absolutely. It signals a massive shift in the nature of the judgments. The first 4 trumpets, as we've seen, were primarily ecological disasters, striking 1/3 of creation's physical systems: land, sea, fresh water, light. Indirect impacts on humanity, though devastating. But these final 3 trumpets, designated as woes, are about to intensify the judgment dramatically. They move from these natural, though divinely caused, calamities to judgments that directly involve the supernatural, unleashing demonic forces from the abyss, causing direct physical torment, unprecedented warfare, and even greater, more direct human suffering in chapters 9 and 11.
So the eagle's cry is like a final blaring warning siren.
Exactly. It's a final, terrifying, prophetic herald, ensuring that no one left on earth can claim ignorance about the impending, deliberately escalated divine wrath. It ratchets up the tension, letting the reader and the inhabitants of the earth know that even the horrific events of chapter 8 were, in a sense, only the introduction. The real agony is about to begin.
Now, obviously, the imagery in Revelation 8 is apocalyptic, describing unique future events. But it still resonates profoundly with our modern world, doesn't it? Especially in an age increasingly anxious about environmental fragility and resource crises.
It really does. Let's break it down for individuals, families, and nations. For individuals, that central image back in verses 3 to 5, where the prayers of the saints become the catalyst for divine action, it demands we take our own prayer lives much more seriously. It's an invitation to reconsider the power and purpose of intercession.
If simple, consistent prayers can genuinely contribute to cosmic action, it really compels us towards a more persistent, earnest communion with God, doesn't it? Believing our prayers actually do something significant.
Precisely. And furthermore, the sheer fragility of creation revealed in the scorched land, the dead seas, the poisoned water. It implicitly demands responsible ecological stewardship from those who claim to follow the Creator. This chapter serves as a stark reminder that we are stewards, not ultimate owners or reckless consumers of God's planet. Our resources, especially fundamental things like fresh water, are precious, precarious, and ultimately under His authority.
Then for families, what's the takeaway?
Revelation 8 calls for prudent preparation, yes, but more importantly for spiritual formation for endurance. It's a call for parents and families to teach resilience, to cultivate deep-rooted faith, modeling trust in God's sovereignty rather than succumbing to the fear and panic that inevitably arise when earthly systems fail or seem threatened.
It's about building trust in God that looks past the temporal comfort provided by often fragile human systems and structures.
Exactly. And then looking broader at nations and culture, the specific judgments described here strike right at the core of modern geopolitical and economic vulnerability. The attack on shipping infrastructure, the contamination of water purity, the disruption of global light and climate patterns. These speak directly into contemporary anxieties about supply chain fragility, potential resource wars, climate catastrophe, and the stability of the global order.
That Wormwood image in particular feels incredibly relevant today.
It really does. It challenges national leaders and global corporations regarding water safety, the dangers of industrial and chemical contamination, and the ethical distribution of essential resources. It serves as a potent reminder to nations that their economic strength and natural systems are ultimately precarious and subject to God's overriding authority. The bitter consequences of corruption, greed, and neglecting God, whether physical or spiritual will, the text suggests, eventually be exacted.
Okay, so while Revelation 8 describes these truly horrific events, which, according to the view we're exploring, are reserved for a future period of judgment known as the tribulation, This perspective also offers profound assurance and real encouragement for believers living today.
Absolutely. That's a crucial application. First and foremost, for those holding a pre-tribulation view, there is the deep assurance of protection from this specific period of wrath. The sources consistently emphasize that the church, the body of Christ, is safely removed, raptured before this time of explicit divine wrath is poured out upon the earth. Believers today in this view are delivered from the wrath to come and are positioned, conceptually, as spectators watching these events unfold from the safety of the heavenly realm, not as participants enduring them.
That's a major source of comfort for many. Second, that scene we keep coming back to, verses 3 through 5, the angel and the censer. It provides such a powerful, enduring validation of prayer.
It truly does. That image of the saints' prayers ascending like incense, being mixed with fire from God's altar, and then igniting judgment on earth. It's arguably one of the most potent proofs in Scripture that your prayers matter. They aren't lost in the ether. They aren't ignored.
They're collected, valued.
And they are integral to God's strategic plan and his timing. This provides immense solace and purpose for every act of faithful intercession, knowing it contributes to God's ultimate victory.
And finally,
Revelation 8 provides unwavering security rooted in God's sovereignty amidst chaos. Even amid terrifying scenes like fiery mountains crashing into the sea and the sun itself being dimmed, the judgment is shown to be perfectly orchestrated, meticulously controlled by the Lamb who was slain but is now reigning. Believers today can find deep security in God's absolute control over history and events, knowing that even apparent chaos is purposeful and is leading directly toward the execution of perfect justice and the ultimate establishment of Christ's righteous kingdom.
And that solemn, deliberate silence that begins the chapter.
Yes, it underscores the value of reverent worship, of quiet awe before God. That kind of worship becomes the anchor for the soul, preparing the saints, whether now or in the future, to face trials with confidence in the one who holds all things together.
So this deep dive into Revelation 8 really confirms that God's judgment, when it comes, is not random chaos. It's portrayed here as a meticulously timed, sovereign, and measured response. It's the necessary, just answer to the accumulating cries for justice from the faithful throughout history. A process that is methodical, intentional, and amazingly initiated by the requests of God's own people.
And what's truly fascinating, almost paradoxical here, is that the massive, earth-shattering divine actions, the burning mountain, the poisoned waters, the dimmed sun, are initiated by something as seemingly quiet as personal and often overlooked as prayer. It suggests that the most powerful, the most catalytic force in the entire cosmos is not the giant meteor or the earthquake, but the humble, persistent smoke of the saints' supplications ascending before the throne of God.
So the final thought for you to wrestle with today is this. What does this all mean for you right now? If the simple, consistent, faithful prayers of believers can actually trigger cosmic judgment, if they can influence the very timetable of God, what might your current intercession, your cries to God, be setting in motion right now that you cannot yet see? It really calls us all to examine the honesty, the consistency, and maybe even the content of our own daily prayers, and to trust completely in the awesome power and perfect sovereignty of the Lamb. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.